I gave my brother $8,500 to pay his debt, but he demanded $3,218 from me. He put my chair by the trash, laughing, "This table is for family." Mom begged me to keep quiet. I didn't. I walked up to his bride's family and played a secret recording out loud, watching his face turn pale until the bride finally reacted. I'm the older brother. That sounds simple enough. In my family, it meant something more specific. I was the one who held things together when everything else fell apart. My name is Eli. I grew up in the same house as Mason, watched the same TV, ate at the same kitchen table, but we never really lived the same life. Mason was the one my parents talked about at dinner. He got the better grades, and I got a job the week after high school graduation because I didn't want to ask anyone for anything. By the time I was 24, I was sending money home every month. $400 at first, then $600 when my dad got laid off, and my mom called me in that particular voice she used, quiet, careful, already sure of the answer. "Your brother needs stability right now, Eli. You've always been the one we could count on." I became the family's safety net so gradually, I barely noticed when the net became the only thing holding everything up. Last year, Mason called about a credit card situation. He tried to start a business, something online, always a little vague on the details, and it collapsed, leaving him $8,500 in the hole. I wired the money within the week. When it cleared, he sent me 2 words. "Figured you would." Not "thank you." Not "I'll pay you back," just "figured you would." Around that same time, my mom suggested we open a joint account for family emergencies so money could move faster when someone needed it. I agreed. I put in $500 the same afternoon. He never said thank you. He just assumed I'd come through. Every single time. The thing is, I didn't do any of it out of resentment. Not at first. I did it because I loved them. Because I kept telling myself that someday Mason would say something real, and my parents would stop splitting us into the one who needed and the one who provided. So when Mason called to invite me to his engagement dinner, something genuinely shifted in my chest. He sounded warm. He said, "You always know how to make these moments work, Eli." And I heard it the way I'd been wanting to for years, like he was asking me to be there, not just asking me to cover the check. I stopped at a wine shop on the way and picked out a bottle of champagne. $120. A good one, because I thought maybe this time, things would be different. I got to the Halcyon 10 minutes early. The elevator opened directly onto the rooftop, open sky, warm lighting, the kind of ambient music designed to make you feel like you've arrived somewhere. I could see the main table already filling in. 12 seats arranged in a long rectangle, white candles, printed menus at every place. Brooke's family was settling in on one side. My parents were near the center. Mason was already laughing at something Brooke's father had said, "Comfortable, at home." I stood there for a moment, taking it in, then went looking for my name on the printed seating chart near the entrance. I found it. Table B. I scanned the room until I found it, a two-top tucked near the far wall by the service door, 3 steps from where the waitstaff stacked their empty trays and the kitchen crew had left the first trash bag of the evening. I checked the card twice. My name was spelled correctly. It was just in the wrong place. I told myself it had to be a mistake. I caught Mason's eye across the room, gave him the kind of look that means I need a word, and waited. He said something to Brooke's father, excused himself, and strolled over. Unhurried. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low. "I think there's a mix-up with the seating. I've got table B over there." He glanced at the chart, then back at me. The smile didn't move. "Sorry," he said. "This table's for family only." He said it the way you'd read a restaurant policy to a stranger. Calm. Slightly bored. I gave him a second, waiting for a laugh, a correction, anything. Nothing came. I looked over at my parents. My mom was smoothing her napkin. My dad was studying the menu. Neither one looked up. Not even for a second. I picked up my champagne, walked to table B, and sat down next to the trash. And somewhere in the back of my mind, something very quiet said, "You've been here before. You just never noticed the view." I gave it about 10 minutes. I sat at table B and watched the main table settle into itself, the easy laughter. The way Brooke's father kept leaning in to say something and making everyone smile. The way my parents looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Mason was at the center of all of it, comfortable, in his element. No one glanced over to check on me. Not once. When Mason stepped away from the table to check his phone near the bar, I followed him over. I kept my voice low. I kept my face neutral. I'd had enough practice at both. Mason, I said. Did I do something? Because I'm trying to understand the seating. He didn't tense up. Didn't look away. He just tilted his head like I'd asked him something mildly inconvenient. Dude, it's just logistics, he said. Brooke's family is big. There wasn't enough room at the main table. I looked back at the main table. I'd counted when I walked in 12 seats, 10 people. 2 chairs sitting empty with no name cards on them. I didn't say that out loud. I just looked at him for a second, waiting to see if he'd catch it himself. He didn't. Or he did, and he didn't care. He was wearing the navy blazer I'd given him for his birthday last year, the one I'd driven 40 minutes to find in the right size. He looked good in it. He always looked good. That was kind of the whole point. Logistics, I said. Right. He clapped me on the shoulder, the way people do when they want a conversation to be over, and walked back to the table. There were 2 empty chairs. He knew it, I knew it, and he smiled the whole way back. I stood there for a moment, then turned and headed toward the restroom. On the way, I passed the main table. My mom reached out and caught my wrist light, quick, the way she always did when she needed to say something she didn't want overheard. "Don't you dare make a scene tonight," she whispered. Her eyes didn't leave the centerpiece. "This is Mason's night." "No. Are you okay, Eli?" "No, I know this feels strange. Let me explain. Just a quiet order to stay invisible and not inconvenience anyone." She was wearing the necklace I'd given her for her 60th birthday, a thin gold chain with a small pendant. She cried when she opened the box. I remember thinking that was the moment she actually saw me. She let go of my wrist and turned back to the table, already laughing at something Brooke's mother had said. Mason's night. Like every other night I could remember. I was the safety net, not the guest. And the net was expected to stay out of sight until someone needed it. I kept walking. But this time, something in the back of my mind had stopped being quiet. Back at table B, I had a clear view of everything. The main table had started ordering. A waiter in a white jacket moved around them with the kind of attention that comes with a big tab, attentive, always nearby, never intrusive. I watched the menus go up one by one. Brooke's family ordered first, then my parents, then Mason, confident, unhurried, pointing at items near the bottom of the page where the prices tend to live. The seafood tower went in. The aged ribeye, $78 a plate, went in 8 times. 2 bottles of Bordeaux at $210 each were carried over like they were made of something fragile. Nobody at that table glanced at the right column once. They didn't need to. Someone else was handling it. A different waiter came to table B. He set down a smaller card, just appetizers and pasta, the kind of menu they leave at a side station when someone's seated as an afterthought. He smiled like nothing about this was unusual, took my order for pasta and sparkling water, and disappeared without making eye contact again. The dessert menus came out at the main table before my pasta did. I counted 9 people ordering the tasting menu, $45 a plate. The second Bordeaux was already half gone. I did the math quietly, the way you do when you already know the answer but need to see it written out. The number I landed on sat somewhere north of $3,000, and not one person at that table had looked over at table B in 40 minutes. But I had a very clear feeling that table B had come up in conversation at some point today. That was when my phone buzzed. A group chat notification, the family thread with my name in it along with Mason's and my parents'. The message was from Mason, time-stamped 4:32 that afternoon, hours before any of us arrived. "Order whatever you want tonight. Don't worry about the bill. Eli's got it like always, lol." I read it once. Then I read it again. Then a third time, slower. Lol. I set the phone face down on the table, picked it back up, opened the message again and took a screenshot. Not because I had a plan, I didn't. Not yet. I just needed proof that this was real, that I hadn't constructed this feeling out of nothing, that the math I'd been doing in my head had actual numbers underneath it. I turned the phone over. The pasta arrived. I ate it slowly, next to the trash, while the main table laughed their way through the dessert course. Eli's got it like always. That lol sat in my chest like a stone. I excused myself from table B, not that anyone noticed, and walked to the restroom. The Halcyon's bathrooms were the kind that matched the rest of the place. Marble countertops, low lighting, single occupancy stalls with actual doors that went floor to ceiling. I went in, locked the door, and sat down on the closed lid. Not because I needed the restroom, because I needed 30 seconds where no one could see my face. I opened the group chat again. The message from 4:32 was still there. Eli's got it like always, lol. I scrolled up without really deciding to, just my thumb moving on its own, going back through 14 months of family thread. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I told myself that. But I found things anyway. March of last year, before my mom's birthday dinner. Don't worry about the check. Eli handles these things. He likes doing it. August, before a family lunch I hadn't even attended. Just tell the restaurant to put it on Eli's card. He won't mind. And then, buried deeper, a message that looked like it had been forwarded into the group by accident. Mason to my mom, dropped into the main thread instead of a private chat. Don't stress about it. He never says no. He never says no. I stared at that for a long time. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the ambient music to cycle through whatever playlist the Halcyon used on Friday nights. Long enough for the tight feeling in my chest to stop feeling like hurt and start feeling like clarity. Then I opened my banking app. The joint account, the one my mom had suggested for family emergencies, had a balance of $47. 3 weeks ago, I transferred $500 into it because Mason had texted saying his car needed urgent repair work, and he was short. I remembered the text clearly. Transmission issue, bro. Can't wait till payday. I'd moved the money the same afternoon without asking questions. I pulled up the transaction history and scrolled to that date. The $500 had been withdrawn the same day I'd sent it. Same hour, almost. The merchant name read, Sun and Sand Resort Boutique. I sat with that for a moment. Sun and Sand Resort Boutique. I looked it up. It was a gift shop attached to an all-inclusive resort. In Cancun. Mason had never mentioned Cancun. Not once. I didn't feel angry, exactly. It was more like watching the last piece of something slot into place, the feeling you get when a picture finally makes sense, even if it's not a picture you wanted to see. I opened the joint account settings, scrolled to outgoing transactions, and selected freeze. The confirmation came back in seconds. Then, I stood up, washed my hands, and looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. I'd carried the champagne into the restroom with me without thinking, still in my hand, still unopened. I set it on the marble shelf next to the sink. I looked at it for a second. Then I left it there and walked back out. If tonight was going where I thought it was going, I wasn't going to need it. I walked back to table B and sat down. The main table was winding into the kind of slow, satisfied ending to a meal where nobody's in a hurry and everyone's comfortable. The second Bordeaux was nearly gone. Brooke was leaning into Mason's shoulder, laughing at something he'd said. Whitaker had his arm resting on the back of his chair, easy and settled. My parents were the most relaxed I'd seen them in years. Everyone looked like they were exactly where they belonged. At 9:47, I saw the waiter in the white jacket peel away and cross the room, not toward the main table, but toward me. He set the leather bill folder down in front of me at table B without pausing, without asking, without any indication that this required explanation. The assumption was so complete it was almost elegant. Of course the bill went to table B. Of course it went to me. I opened it. $3,218. Service charge included. I sat with it. I thought about the champagne I'd left on a marble shelf in the bathroom. I thought about a resort boutique in Cancun and $47 left in an account I'd funded for emergencies. I thought about a text message sent at 4:32 inches the afternoon and the 3 letters at the end of it. And I thought about something very simple. I hadn't signed anything tonight. I hadn't been part of the reservation. I had been seated at a different table, a table that, by Mason's own words, wasn't even for family. There was no version of this where the bill was mine. I closed the folder. I picked it up. I walked to the main table. I didn't rehearse anything. I didn't plan a speech. I set the folder down in the center of the table between the empty glasses and the dessert plates and said 7 words, quietly, to the table in general. I think this belongs to this table. Then I pulled out the empty chair next to Whitaker and sat down. Not because I was making a point of it, because there was nowhere else to sit. Table B had never really been my seat, and I was done pretending otherwise. If this was a family dinner, I was going to be at the table for the ending. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. For the first time all evening, every person at that table was looking at me. Nobody moved. The folder sat in the center of the table. The empty glasses caught the candlelight. Somewhere behind me, I heard the soft clatter of a busser slowing down mid-stride, one of those involuntary pauses when a room changes temperature and everyone feels it at once. Brooke's hand was still resting on Mason's arm, but she wasn't laughing anymore. My mom had gone very still. My dad was looking at his napkin. Mason was looking at the folder. Whitaker was the first one to pick it up. He opened it the way someone does when they're not surprised to find a problem, just waiting to understand the shape of it. He looked at the number. He set it back down. Then he looked at me, not with pity, not with accusation. Just a steady, even look that said he was paying attention. "Who made the reservation tonight?" he asked. Not to the table in general, to Mason. Mason shifted in his chair. "I did. But it's fine. We have a system. Who was expected to cover the bill?" The question landed quietly and stayed there. I reached into my pocket and set my phone on the table, screen up. The screenshot was already open, the group chat. The message from 4:32 that afternoon. The exact words Mason had sent to a thread that included my name. "Order whatever you want tonight. Don't worry about the bill. Eli's got it like always, lol." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Whitaker picked up the phone. He read it once. Then he passed it to Brooke without comment. She read it. Her expression didn't collapse, it just went quiet in a way that was somehow worse. She looked up at Mason. He didn't look back. He was staring at a spot somewhere between the centerpiece and the bill folder, doing something with his jaw that people do when they're building toward an excuse. "It's not like that," Mason said. "That was just, it was shorthand. Eli and I have an understanding. He's always been the one who what?" Whitaker said. Mason looked at me then. Something shifted behind his eyes, the calculation you can see happen in real time when someone decides that offense is better than retreat. "This is what you do, Eli. You make everything into a thing. It's his engagement dinner." He said the last part to the table, like bringing the room in as backup. "This is supposed to be a good night and you're sitting here making it about you." That's kind of his role in the family. Honestly, the side character who needs to feel important. Side character. I let that sit for a second. I thought about a printed seating chart with my name at table B. I thought about a navy blazer I'd driven 40 minutes to find. I thought about "figured you would. And he never says no," and $47 in an emergency account that had paid for someone's vacation. I thought about 14 months of a group chat I'd been in but never really been part of. Then I looked at Mason and said, very quietly, "I'm not the safety net tonight. And this table is for family only. Remember?" Nobody laughed. Nobody jumped in. A few people looked at the tablecloth. Trent, seated at the far end, had gone completely still. And across the table, I watched Whitaker slowly set down his dessert fork, fold his napkin, and look at Mason the way a man looks at someone he is reassessing in real time. That was when I knew the evening was over. "Brooke and I will cover our portion of the bill," Whitaker said. His voice was the same temperature it had been all evening, measured, unhurried. "You can handle yours." He said it to Mason. Then he looked at me and gave one small nod. Nothing elaborate, just acknowledgement. The kind that doesn't need words around it. Mason opened his mouth. My mom started to say something. Whitaker said simply, "I think dinner's done," and reached for his jacket. The waiter appeared with the POS terminal. The table rearranged itself into the specific quiet of people pretending not to watch something fall apart. Mason stared at his portion of the bill, the number left after Whitaker's family had separated their share, and I watched the color leave his face by degrees. He didn't have it. I could see him not having it in real time. Brooke stood up to get her coat. She did it calmly, without announcement. And before she walked away from the table, she unclipped her car key from Mason's keychain, the one he'd been holding because she'd asked him to earlier in the evening, and put it in her own bag without saying a word. She didn't look at him when she did it. I drove home alone. The city looked the same as it always did on a Friday night, lit up, indifferent, moving at its own pace. I kept the radio off. I didn't go over the evening in my head, didn't replay the table, didn't rehearse what I should have said or shouldn't have. I'd said 7 words, and then I'd been quiet, and that felt like enough. The messages started before I got home. Mason first 3 texts in a row, arriving fast, the way texts do when someone is typing and deleting and typing again. The first one was angry. "I can't believe you did that. You embarrassed me in front of her entire family." The second came 11 minutes later, the temperature already dropping. "Ro, she's not answering my calls. Can you please just say something to her? Tell her it was a misunderstanding." The third arrived just after midnight, shorter, "Please." My mom's email came the next morning. 5 paragraphs. I read it once. It covered everything: how hard Mason had worked for this relationship, how important this engagement was for the family, how I had always been the strong one. And didn't I understand that meant sometimes carrying more than felt fair? The last paragraph said she wasn't taking sides. She was just asking me to think about what I was doing to us. Then there was Brooke's email. 2 paragraphs. No subject line. She wrote that she was sorry for inviting me to a dinner she hadn't known would go the way it did. She said she'd read the group chat message several more times since getting home, and that she was sorry it had taken her this long to see what she was seeing. She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't explain what she was going to do next. She just said she was sorry. I read Brooke's email 3 times. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I mostly felt tired in the way you feel tired. When something you'd been hoping wasn't true turns out to be exactly as true as you'd feared. I didn't reply to any of them that night. My mom showed up at my door Saturday morning. I heard the bell and knew before I opened it. She was standing on the mat in the way people stand when they're not sure they're going to be let in, slightly back from the door, hands together. She didn't push past me when I opened it. She waited. That was new. She came in and sat down and talked for a while about Mason, about Brooke, about what the family needed right now. I let her talk. At some point, she stopped, and in the pause she said something quietly, almost to herself. "You were really hurt last night, weren't you?" It wasn't a question, exactly. It was the first thing she'd said in the conversation that wasn't about Mason. "Yeah," I said. "I was." She nodded slowly. She didn't apologize in the way that would have fixed anything. But she said it, and she knew I'd heard her, and that was more than I'd had before. After a while, I walked her to the door. She hugged me on the way out quick, uncertain, and I let her. I stood in the doorway and watched her car pull away, and then I went back inside and closed the door. On Monday morning, I opened my banking app and closed the joint account. Not out of anger. There was nothing left in it anyway, $47 that I moved back into my own account first, just on principle. I stopped the automatic transfer I'd been running to my parents since my dad got laid off. I sent a short text to Mason saying I needed some time and that I hoped things worked out with Brooke, whatever that meant now. He didn't reply. I didn't expect him to. I didn't block anyone. I didn't write a long letter. I didn't post anything. There was nothing to announce. I just stopped doing the thing I'd always done and let the quiet come in where it used to be. That Friday, I stopped at a wine shop on the way home. I picked out a bottle of champagne, not the same one I'd left on a marble shelf in a rooftop bathroom, but a good one. $120, almost exactly. I took it home, opened it on my balcony, and poured a glass. There was no one to clink with. That was fine. There was also no one expecting me to pick up a $3,000 check for a table I wasn't allowed to sit at. I stood there for a while with the glass, looking out at the city, and let myself have the quiet. They'd wanted a safety net. I'd wanted a seat at the table. That night at the Halcyon, we'd both finally been honest about it. It turned out honesty was something I could live with.